This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9. English news as it should be.
Good morning, you're watching News9. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and on the show today, we'll bring you all the latest updates on the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict and a supplementary side story of that being the fact that gold is touching record high. How far will this rally go? That's a big question. Kunal Shah will be here with all the answers. Also on the show, will markets today be able to shrug off the losses that we saw on Friday? Mohit Gang will be joining us on the show. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Watching Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you all the headlines that we're tracking for you this Monday morning. Tensions escalate sharply in West Asia as Israel and Iran trade deadly strike. Explosions rock Jerusalem while Trump warns Tehran and urges swift resolution. Donald Trump claims he can broker peace between Iran and Israel, cites back-channel talks in motion while comparing it to India-Pakistan truce that New Delhi says was bilateral. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will do whatever is necessary against Iran, doesn't rule out regime change as strikes target Tehran's leadership and nuclear sites. Meanwhile, Tata Group has dismissed social media claims of Iranian missile destroying Haifa port. Gold has breached the 1 lakh rupee per 10 grams mark in India's West Asia tensions and weak rupee spark rally. How high can gold really go? We discuss on the show. The second black box has been recovered from Air India crash site as probe deepens. Meanwhile, Air India works closely with Tata Group companies to assist the families of victims. India is set to become the world's third largest economy, says Prime Minister Modi, as Cyprus Business Roundtable MOU between National Payments Corporation of India and Eurobank signed, paving the way for UPI services to be introduced in Cyprus. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman highlights Modi government's push for small entrepreneurs in Ladakh, distributes 5 crore rupees in loans under Mudra, PM-EGP, Stand Up India and PM Vishwakarma schemes. The State Bank of India has cut interest rates on Amrit Rishi special fixed deposit scheme while keeping regular FD rates unchanged with new rates effective June 15th. Overnight tensions flare dramatically in West Asia as Israel and Iran continue to exchange deadly strikes across the border. Loud explosions rang out in Jerusalem early Monday, shortly after Israel's army warned of a new missile salvo from Iran and advised the public to take cover until further notice. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump addressed the crisis, asserting that the situation could be resolved easily, though he issued a firm warning to Tehran, cautioning against any attacks on American assets. Take a look.
Israel and Iran launched fresh attacks on each other overnight into Sunday, killing scores. That's as US President Donald Trump said the conflict could be ended easily, while warning Tehran not to strike any US targets. Iran says dozens have been killed in Israel's onslaught since Friday, including 60 on Saturday, half of whom were children, when a missile brought down a Tehran apartment block. More than a dozen people have been killed in Israel and hundreds injured since Iran launched its retaliatory attacks. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited a residential area in the city of Bat Yam, hit by an overnight Iranian missile onslaught. He watched as rescue efforts searching for missing people buried under the rubble of a collapsed multi-story building continued. Netanyahu said Iran will, quote, pay a heavy price for civilian deaths. The Israeli military has warned Iranians living near weapons facilities to evacuate after both Netanyahu and Trump said Israel's attacks would intensify. Trump has lauded Israel's offensive while denying Iranian allegations that the US has taken part in it. He warned Tehran not to widen its retaliation to include US facilities or interests. In a message on Truth Social, Trump added that the US could, quote, easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict. An Iranian government spokesperson said on Sunday that the country had been ready to hold a sixth round of nuclear talks prior to Israel's initial strikes on Friday. The country's foreign minister has previously said that Iran was acting only in self-defense. The United States has been negotiating with Iran to try and secure a commitment to severely restrict its nuclear program, which Iran says is purely civilian. But Israel sees it as an existential threat because of its weapons potential. Trump gave no details of any possible deal.
In a typically self-praising post on Truth Social, US President Donald Trump claimed he could broker peace between Iran and Israel, even as tensions between the longtime foes continues to intensify. Now, Trump hinted that back-channel negotiations may already be in motion, drawing a comparison to what he described as US involvement in claiming the recent conflict and calming tension between India and Pakistan. However, New Delhi has insisted that the ceasefire with Islamabad was reached through direct diplomatic engagement without the mediation of the United States. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not ruling out the possibility of a regime change in Iran following a massive military campaign that has targeted Tehran's top leadership and nuclear infrastructure. In an interview with Fox News, Netanyahu said Israel would do whatever is necessary to eliminate what he called the existential threat posed by Iran. Now, while Iran officially claims the goal of Operation Rising Lion is to dismantle Iran's nuclear and missile programs, Netanyahu admitted that toppling the regime in Tehran could be a natural outcome, calling it very weak.
We can't have the world's most dangerous regime have the world's most dangerous weapons. We're protecting ourselves, but by doing so, we're protecting many others. Could certainly be the result because the Iran regime is very weak. I think it's basically left with two things. It's plans to have atomic bombs and ballistic missiles. That's basically what Iran has. They certainly don't have the people. 80% of the people will throw these theological thugs out.
And the impact of tensions flaring up in West Asia has sent gold prices skyrocketing. Here in India, gold hit an all-time high on June 15, breaching the 1 lakh rupees per 10-gram mark for 24-karat gold. On the MCX, or the multi-commodity exchange, domestic gold futures surged as much as 2% in early trade to touch 1,403 rupees per 10 grams. There are multiple factors, but the main one driving this rally in gold is the geopolitical unrest. Now, with Israel on high alert and the US preparing civilian evacuation plans, investors are flocking to gold as a safe haven investment amid fears of wider instability. Then there is the weakening rupee. The falling rupee has made imported gold costlier in India, directly impacting domestic prices. At the same time, weak US labor and inflation data have raised expectations of rate cuts by the US Fed, further driving up gold's appeal as a low-risk investment. Now, globally, gold prices have rallied with spot prices crossing $3,428 an ounce and US futures rising even sharper than that. The surge reflects a global shift towards safe haven assets as geopolitical risks overshadow trade concerns. Now, coming to the support and resistance levels, analysts say international gold prices have strong support near the $3,400 mark and face resistance at $3,480 an ounce. Goldman Sachs, in the meantime, says gold could reach the $3,700 mark by the end of this year and as much as $4,000 by this time next year. In India, some experts believe gold could cross the 1,05,000 mark too. Well, we have Kunal Shah, Head of Commodities Research at Nirmal Bang, joining me this morning. Kunal, good morning. First up, it was the Russia-Ukraine war, then it was Israel's campaign on Hamas starting 7th October 2023, followed by Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on practically every country in the world, and now Israel, Iran heading towards what looks like, at least for now, a full regional war. Now, every time gold has breached new records. Where does this rally this time logically reach?
Yeah, so we believe that Some of the other factors keep driving gold prices, but it's just the geopolitical thing. If you look at what's happening on the demand side, the Indian demand has been faltering, and with the higher prices now, we are going to see a further drop in demand. Number one. Number two, due to this ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran, there is a fear of a widespread crisis in the Middle East, which in last 3 days was not the case. So I believe that these are not the levels to buy gold. One should wait. And in fact, these are the right time to hedge your inventories. So all the jewelers who have been waiting for quite a bit of long time, and I think $3,500 seems to be quite toppish for gold to sustain and move up until there is a major retaliation or there is a major geopolitical event happening in the world. I am not advocating to buy gold at these levels. I'm expecting gold to soften a bit and prices to go down in a shorter term and near term, and these are not the levels to buy for sure.
All right, may not be the levels to buy, Kunal, but the commentary that we are seeing and also the action that we are seeing on ground is that retaliation, something you mentioned, is already underway. And Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, has come on record to say that this war could continue for as long as it takes to destabilize the dictatorship regime here in Iran. Now, the question really is, what happens if the latest escalation that we are seeing happens to be short-lived, let's say another few days or another couple of weeks at the most? Where does gold go if this retaliation or this conflict is short-lived?
I think if this retaliation and the conflict is short-lived, then gold prices will go down to $3,300.
Okay.
Yeah, it will translate to 95 to 94,000 rupees, and it will not sustain at all. One more interesting thing is that the crisis have escalated in Saturday and Sunday. So
That's
ever
right.
since the markets have closed, and you see today the way gold is open or the crude is open, we've seen Israel and Iran both attacking their refineries and the oil depots. And in spite of that, oil is still 1.5–2% up, and in spite of that, gold is also marginally up.
Right.
So it seems that some or the other international power like US, or for example in the Middle East, maybe Saudi Arabia, I don't know, but some of the other country will come into the diplomatic solution in this crisis, because I think it's already escalating, and now even Israel is taking a lot of casualties, and that is not something, So even when both countries are adamant that they don't want to stop it, but I think that some of the other way diplomatic solutions may work going forward during this week, and I just get a feeling that maybe by the end of the week the crisis would moderate rather than to escalate. So wait for some time before you enter into fresh long position in gold.
All right. Well, diplomatic solution, we don't really know, because if you remember, Donald Trump had said that he will stop the Russia-Ukraine war within 24 hours of taking office, and it's been just about 4 months since Trump sat in the Oval Office for the second time, and that war continues to go on. But you were talking about oil prices as well. Is it fair to assume at this moment that gold and oil prices will be coupled? They will move in the same direction? Because like you mentioned, oil is also trading much higher. It was at about $73 to a barrel last when I checked.
Yeah, so oil, until you see a major oil production from Iran dropping, because Iran is mainly exporting its oil to China, and if that is being hampered, then say 3.5 million barrels being produced by Iran, and if that facilities are hit, out of which 1.5 million, 1 million barrels is getting disrupted, in that kind of scenario, oil can shoot up to $80 for Brent. See, the thing with oil is, everyone knows that the moment this crisis is going to end, oil is going to drop. So that's why we are not seeing any follow-up buying taking place, in spite of the fact that major oil refinery and gas field in Iran has been impacted and has caught fire and is not operational right now. In spite of that, oil prices are not shooting up. So I get the same feeling. $80 for Brent seems to be the top for the short term. If it escalates, I don't know, then it can really, if Iran's production is affected by 1.5 million barrels, then I think oil prices can really shoot up very badly.
All right. Well, sometime back, Kunal, you were mentioning that if it is a short-term scenario, then perhaps we'll look at 3,300 levels on gold, $3,300 per ounce. But what if I were to turn that around on its head and say that perhaps this becomes a lasting regional war? It expands beyond just Israel and Iran. Then what happens to gold? Where does gold go in a scenario if this becomes a long-term war?
Yeah, so it's then in that scenario, if this spreads to another country, or if another countries may get involved, say if US is getting involved and Iran along with the other allies, so Iran's strong allies, China. So in that kind of scenario where it spreads to another country, then definitely it will lead to a sharp upside in gold, $3,700, 1,07,000, 8,000 on Indian rupees possible.
Oh,
But
1,07,000-8,000 rupees on
Yeah.
India is possible. That's a big
Yeah,
number.
but I'm not still anticipating that kind of scenario.
All right, you're not anticipating, but of course, we were just playing out those graphics also. And for our viewers, gold has already returned as much as 31% to investors in this calendar year alone. And up until June 15th, the rally that we saw in gold was as much as 10,000 rupees in just 74 days. That's the kind of rally which seems to be, at least in recent memory, a little unprecedented. But Kunal, coming back to you, what should investors do who are looking at their equity holdings dropping because all the flare-up in West Asia and a direct impact on the stock markets? But what about those who are seeing their equity holdings go down but have not made perhaps timely investments in gold? You're telling them not to buy gold even now. So what should those investors do?
I think I'm not saying it now. If you are buying now, be prepared to average it out. I'm not saying that completely avoid it. So somebody is not having exposure. Having exposure in this kind of uncertain world in gold is must. So if you are buying now, wait. If prices go, more firepower to add more. Because already we've seen in a short term, gold prices shot up from 93,000 rupees to 1 lakh rupees. So that's the key reason, and that is because of geopolitical escalation. So if that reverses, then it can go down, and perhaps for that same reason, you should have a room to add more gold.
All right, you should have room to add more gold, but you said perhaps not the best time to buy. Is this an opportune time perhaps to sell in that case, given your understanding right now, Kunal, that this may not be a regional conflict?
I am of the very clear view, this is not the time to buy, because see, to go long in gold is already discounted. Okay.
Right.
So there's no surprise element right now. We all know that US interest rate may edge lower in times to come. Each and everything, central bank buying, de-dollarization, all the reasons, like you said at the start of your show, all the reasons have been discounted in the price itself. So if you ask me, there are no more reasons for me to accumulate gold right now.
Right. So my question is, again, I'm reversing that theory and saying that perhaps it's not the best time to buy. Is it a time to sell? Because market experts tell you buy on dips, and equity markets are seeing a sizable dip right now. Does it make sense, in your opinion, for investors who had invested in gold previously to cash out at this moment and buy the dip in the equity market?
Equity market, I will not comment, but I would say if you sell gold right now, perhaps you may get it at a lower rate. At that time, you can re-enter, and this is definitely a good time to book profits.
All right, a good time to book profits. Well, let's leave it at that. Kunal Shah, always a pleasure having you here with us on News9. Thank you so much for all your inputs. Time for a very short break, but coming up on the other side, we'll try and get a sense of the mood of the Indian markets. Remember, we had seen the US markets decline in trade on Friday, and so had the Indian markets, all this on account of the escalation in conflict in West Asia. Well, that escalation has continued over the weekend as well. So the question really is, will markets be able to shrug off the losses of last week, or is there more pain to be felt in the Indian stock markets? Well, Mohit Gang will be here on the other side of the break to break all this down for us. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कर आता है, आगे आगे बढ़ बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
This is the drive of your dreams.
You and I, we are dreamers. You and I, we are believers.
Introducing the all-new Skoda Kailak. Own your dream.
Skoda.
ज्ञान का चले जब मंत्र छू छू, आसमान को छू ले तू, छू मंत्र छू। आइए सुनते हैं कहानी जो है हजारों साल पुरानी।
अरे भागो भागो यमराज आया, साथ अपने लाया 3 दुष्टों की सेना।
मैं यमराज और 3 मेरे साथ, एक है टीवी और जी और भी है बाकी।
टीवी पता है, पर जी और बी ये क्या बला है?
जी यानी गलत फहमी, बी यानी भेदभाव। इसी से टीवी करती है लाखों को परेशान। सुनो सुनो सुनो, इन दोनों के डर से हमारे देश के भाई बहन सही समय पर टीबी की जांच नहीं करवाते और इस बीमारी का शिकार बनते हैं।
गरीब सोचता है कि मुझे टीबी हो गई तो मैं छुपा लूंगा, और अमीर सोचता है कि ये सिर्फ दुबले पतले गरीब को ही होती है। अरे ये टीबी है, इसका बैक्टीरिया जात पात ऊंच नीच अमीरी गरीबी सोशल स्टेटस कुछ नहीं देखता, ये सिर्फ ड्रॉपलेट से फैलता है।
अरे भाई टीबी छुआछूत की बीमारी नहीं, ये दोस्ती यारी खाने की थाली जादू की झप्पी से नहीं फैलती है। जरूरत है सही समय पर दवाई लेने की और भेदभाव को दूर करने की।
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's bring you a mood check of the markets. But before we come to the Indian markets, which have opened a little higher this morning, let's look at what's going on in the rest of the world. Let's begin with Asia. In fact, Asia has given mixed cues this morning in early trade. The Hang Seng is down about just about 0.1%, more or less flattish. So is the case with the Shanghai Composite Index, which is just about flattish, however, a little bit in the green. Better news coming in from Korea and Japan. South Korea's Kospi Index is up almost 0.84% or so in trade in the morning, and the Nikkei 225, Japan's large index representing most of its companies, is up almost 1% in trade, really unshaken by what is going on and the escalation that we've seen in West Asia over the weekend. Meanwhile, Taiwan's TAIEX is down about 0.32% or so. That's the mood on Asia. Let's look at the Indian markets this morning. Nifty 50 and Sensex are both in the green. In fact, both the indices, Sensex and Nifty, have inched up about 0.22% or so in trade. Well, it's gone a little higher. Now Nifty 50 is up almost 0.3%, but still below the 25,000 levels. In fact, barely managing to touch even the 24,800 levels, down at about 24,793 in early trade. Meanwhile, Sensex has a lot of catching up to do to reclaim that 82,000 levels. Meanwhile, there's better news coming in for, or similar news if I can say, coming in for mid-cap and small-cap. Small-cap index is up almost 0.4% or so, and the mid-cap index is also up 0.2% in trade. So nothing really to complain about in the mood of the market this morning. Remember, the US markets on Friday had closed much lower, and this was again given what we saw flare up in West Asia. But markets seem to be shrugging off most of those losses in early trade, at least this Monday morning. Volatility also, incidentally, is lower today, still well below the 15-point level. It is now at about 14.83. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map and try and make sense of which are the sectors which are adding to the rally this morning. Well, the IT sector seems to be in good stead. TCS, Infosys, HCL, Tech Mahindra all up more than half a percentage point. So it's the case with banking. At least the heavyweights HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank are in the green this morning. Doesn't seem to be the case with SBI, which has announced a few rate cuts for fixed deposits, as well as Axis Bank and Kotak Bank. Meanwhile, energy stocks are doing well. ONGC is up almost 0.8% or so. Remember, this was one of the aberrations that we saw on Friday. The stock was up about 3% or so, given the hike in oil prices globally. Well, that benefit continues to accrue to ONGC, which is up about 0.8% or so in trade this morning. So it's the case, in fact, even with non-energy minerals, the cement stocks, the steel stocks are also in the positive this morning. And of course, Bharti Airtel registering a solid 1% growth or so. So let's understand and unpack all this. We have a very special guest with us, the co-founder and CEO of Moneyfront, Mohit Gang, joins us this morning. Mohit, good morning. Thank you for being here with us on News9. What's the mood on the market? One would have assumed that given the escalation that we saw over the weekend, markets may not have reacted as positively as what we are seeing on the screen this morning.
Morning, Karthik. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Look, honestly, yes, I would have anticipated and perhaps guessed that markets would open up in a somber note today morning, given that the West Asia escalation is now heading into fifth straight day, and without any indications or signs of abatement. It's a bit surprising, but I think perhaps markets not just in India but globally have taken this in stride, and maybe the markets have a sense that this is not getting escalated beyond Israel and Iran for the time being, right? And I think perhaps there are only two risk factors which emanate out of this entire escalation globally. Point number one is only if oil flares up dramatically. The oil has shot up about 10-13% from its last month's number, and it's trading at around $75 odd. But yes, I think the severe flare up in oil is still not happening, and that would happen only if Iran were to perhaps announce some closure down on the Hormuz Strait, which I don't think so is coming. But yes, there is always a little chance or a little probability. But right now, I don't think so. The market is factoring that. So that's point number one. And point number two is, I think perhaps market might react a little negatively globally if they think that this escalation will flare up much beyond and much larger, which means that perhaps US will get involved, or maybe few other powers will get involved, so on and so forth, which doesn't look like right now. I think it is just a two-way street between Israel and Iran, and they will settle scores either ways within few days or perhaps a little longish time. And I think that's where it is, right? So I think given the entire contour of this escalation, markets have taken it in stride, though I don't think so there is immediate big gain coming in from the market right now. The kind of situation we are in geopolitically, I don't think so markets have any reason to give you a big positive stride, and markets have all the reasons to give you a negative stride. So one has to be extremely cautious right now in trading and in positioning in the market.
All right. Well, of course, negative surprises cannot be ruled out at all from the market at this time. But Mohit, I'm looking at the energy stocks, I'm looking at oil stocks. And of course, this seems to be one sector which is directly benefiting from what we are seeing in West Asia by way of the conflict between Israel and Iran. In fact, Oil India is up almost 1.5% in trade. ONGC is up about 0.8% or so. So is the story coming in from BPCL, HPCL, IOC. Most oil majors that we are seeing are up in trade, barring Reliance, which is also up, but just about marginally up, and the sort of reverse side of that being Coal India, which is down about 0.3%. So Mohit, I want to understand, for foreign investor, is this, given that one can with some degree of certainty assume that the worst of West Asia is not behind us as yet, is it a good time to be invested in oil stocks as a thematic pick?
Karthik, look, honestly, I think that's a very, very tricky call. Honestly, it's a very fast-moving and rapidly changing scenario. You never know which way the situation will work, whether it will favor the upstream companies or the downstream companies, and one has to be extremely nimble-footed if has to trade in the oil companies. It's not a bad bet, honestly. It's not a bad bet, but you never know. Sometimes what happens is government intervenes by hiking up excise duties and taking up the extra amount of Yes, yes,
Right.
and bringing more taxes and taking up the extra amount of money which is lying on the table, and the investors are left high and dry. And sometimes the market cools down if, let's say, the escalation were to stop. Yes, tomorrow suddenly there is some announcement of a ceasefire or something. The oil prices might immediately cool off, and again everything goes off in a jiffy. So one has to be extremely nimble-footed. Yes, it's not a bad trade to do, but one has to be very careful on this one.
All right. I'm also looking at some defense stocks this morning because anytime there's a conflict, whether or not there's a direct involvement and a direct export window for defense stocks, that is a theme that gets picked up. And of course, HAL is up about 1.2%. Bharat Electronics is up about 1.75% in trade. Again, a call on defense stocks. This is one sector which has seen a sizable rally in the last few weeks, Mohit. Is this a sector that you would be bullish on?
I think given the world in which we are living in, Karthik, one has to be a long-term bull on defense as a sector. Now, how much of that would you want to pay up in terms of multiples and premium is a call which I leave it to every individual. Honestly, these stocks are not cheap, but given the kind of geopolitical situation which all of us are living in, I think these are not bad bets to kind of go with a fairly long-term view. And I also see a lot of mutual fund houses picking up a few of the large cap defense names as their top picks last month. So I think there is this overall sentiment around the defense picks, wherein we see a daily news flow of new orders being given, new books, trade books, order books being executed, and some of the other news piece item out here and there. And that is what is fueling the rally. I just hope that retail investors are extremely cognizant of which names they are getting in and what multiples are they getting in. And that's the only risk which I see.
All right. And coming specifically to Adani Ports now, again, given all the news flow which is coming, even though Adani has denied that there hasn't been too much damage inflicted on the Haifa port, but given the fact that Adani is a sizable player in the entire shipping and ports business, where do you see Adani Ports, let's say, going from here? It has taken a bit of a beating. Stock is down about 0.6% or so. But if this conflict were to continue, then what's your bet on Adani Ports?
Look, no conflict will last forever, right? And I think Haifa port is towards the other end of Israel, though it's not out of strike range from any of the, let's say, arsenal which Iran would have. And it's always the ports and such economic zones or transport hubs are always like the most sought after targets in any kind of armed escalations. So from that perspective, yes, there is an iota of risk or there is an element of risk which is involved out here. But I don't think so Haifa port alone kind of makes for that large an extent of the entire company or the entire stock. And we have had news coming in right from the CFO of Adani Ports that there has been no damages done to the ports so far. So my sense is I think there is no point of creating fear mongering out here. I think everything to me seems like status quo as of now. But yes, it's not again a time to go all out and play the stock.
All right, and I want to stay on the same chart for just a little bit longer and also talk to you about Indigo. So again, this is a stock which seems to be perhaps, it could be one of the cases where people prefer to fly Indigo as compared to Air India. At least that's a sentiment that one is anecdotally picking up right now, given the tragic accident that we saw in Ahmedabad last week. So the question really, Mohit, is that buy on dips is usually a preferred strategy. Indigo is down today. Is this a good time to get into Indigo, given that India's air traffic is not going to decline, but people may be looking for what they believe could be safer options to take to the skies? Is that a valid theory to go ahead and be bullish on Indigo?
Given the market which we have, wherein we only have 2 or 3 players, look, Indigo, SpiceJet to some extent, and then Air India or Vistara Air India combined, right? So there aren't many choices left for, and Akasa, there aren't many choices in Indian skies available for investors. In the listed market also, there are very few choices available. And given the market share dominance and given the control which Indigo has, and given the punctuality and given all the other factors which one attributes to Indigo, I think it's a decent bet. Only thing one has to be cognizant is that oil prices do negatively impact airline stocks. So I think that is something which will play out on these stocks perhaps, and one has to be aware of that. But otherwise, thinking that yes, there will be some market share which will move from Air India to Indigo, I don't think so, Karthik. That's a long-term play, honestly, from that perspective, because things get evened out. Every news gets played out for 2-3 days, a week, a month, and then I think everything normalizes to that extent. So my sense is that market share theory perhaps might not play out that.
Right, Mohit Gang there with his views this morning. Mohit, thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you here with us on News9, especially on a Monday morning. Well, time for a very short break, but we will be back with more stories on the other side of the break, and of course also the global stories that we are tracking for you. You are watching Morning Brief at 9.
खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
जन जन का रखे ध्यान, टीबी मुक्त भारत अभियान।
इस अभियान का आह्वान, यदि है आपको टीबी के लक्षण तो जल्द जांच से ही होगा सबसे तेज समाधान। टीबी होने पर जल्द जांच से उपचार में आती है तेजी और गंभीर बीमारी का खतरा होता है कम। सुरक्षित होता है आपका परिवार और अन्य करीबी जन। कुछ समूहों में टीबी का खतरा अधिक होता है, जैसे वे लोग जिन्हें पिछले 5 वर्ष में टीबी हुआ हो, 60 वर्ष या उससे अधिक आयु, धूम्रपान और शराब का सेवन करने वाले, कुपोषित, टीबी निकट संपर्क हुआ हो, मधुमेह रोगी, HIV से पीड़ित लोग। तो टीबी के लक्षण होने पर अपने नजदीकी सरकारी या निजी अस्पताल या आयुष्मान आरोग्य मंदिर में निशुल्क जांच और उपचार पाएं। आइए हम सब साथ मिलकर देश को टीबी मुक्त बनाएं।
टीबी फ्री इंडिया बनाने में सक्रिय भूमिका निभाएं।
डाउनलोड करें टीबी आरोग्य साथी ऐप। स्वास्थ्य एवं परिवार कल्याण मंत्रालय द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's move on now to the Ahmedabad air tragedy. Well, in a major development in the Air India crash investigation, officials have recovered the second black box, the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR from the crash site. Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister R.K. Mishra confirmed the recovery in an official statement. The CVR, which records pilot conversations, warning alarms and cockpit sounds, is expected to provide investigators with vital insights into the final moments before the crash. Well, this follows the earlier recovery of the first black box from the rooftop of a nearby building on Friday. Together, both recorders will help reconstruct a detailed timeline of the tragedy. Meanwhile, a parliamentary panel is set up to take up a detailed review of the tragic Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad. According to media sources, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Transport, headed by Rajya Sabha MP and JDU leader Sanjay Jha, is planning deliberations with key stakeholders including the DGCA, Air India, as well as the manufacturer of the Dreamliner that went down, American company Boeing. The committee aims to produce a comprehensive report on air passenger safety and will examine multiple aspects from aircraft procurement and maintenance history to regulatory oversight. Now, in ongoing efforts, Air India has said it is working closely with Tata Group companies to assist the families of victims. Over 400 relatives have arrived in Ahmedabad, with each family assigned a dedicated caregiver. The airline added that it has contacted the next of kin of all passengers and crew, and the process of handing over mortal remains and personal belongings is underway. Air India has assured full cooperation with the ongoing investigation. And moving on now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on his historic visit to Cyprus, declared that India is on track to become the third largest economy in the world, placing strong emphasis on building the trust of doing business alongside the ease of doing business. Addressing a business roundtable in Nicosia with President Nikos Christodoulidis, Prime Minister Modi called for deepening bilateral economic ties, describing Cyprus as a reliable partner and a gateway to Europe for Indian businesses. The leaders highlighted opportunities for collaboration across multiple sectors, from trade, fintech and logistics to tourism, defense as well as innovation. A key highlight of the visit was the signing of an MOU between the National Payments Corporation of India and Eurobank, paving the way for UPI services to be introduced in Cyprus for cross-border digital payments, marking a new milestone in fintech connectivity between the two nations.
पिछले एक दशक में भारत विश्व की 5वीं सबसे बड़ी इकोनॉमी बना और बहुत निकट भविष्य में हम दुनिया की तीसरी इकोनॉमी बनने की दिशा में बहुत तेज गति से आगे बढ़ रहे हैं.
And moving on, there will be no more bike taxi rides in Karnataka starting today. The High Court has refused to grant interim relief to app-based platforms like Rapido, effectively upholding the state government's decision to ban such services. The ban results from the Transport Department's stance that bike taxis are illegal under current regulations, as they involve using non-commercial two-wheelers for paid rides. Now, the department had earlier issued notices to operators warning of strict action for violations. Rapido, which is one of the largest players in this space, had challenged the order but failed to convince the court. The High Court's decision means companies like Rapido and Uber Moto must cease operations in the state from June 16th or face legal consequences. The move majorly impacts commuters in Bengaluru and other cities where bike taxis had emerged as a fast and affordable option amid heavy traffic congestion. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman reaffirmed the Modi government's strong commitment to empowering small entrepreneurs and advancing financial inclusion. Speaking at a credit outreach program in Ladakh, she distributed loan sanction letters worth 5 crore rupees to beneficiaries under central government schemes like Mudra, PM-EGP, Stand Up India and PM Vishwakarma. By emphasizing last-mile credit delivery and the integration of Ladakh's unique identity into national growth, Sitharaman noted that over 64,000 Mudra loans and 600 plus Stand Up India loans have already been sanctioned in the region. She also highlighted the growing presence of financial infrastructure in Ladakh, with over 500 banking touchpoints now operational and a steady rise in credit activity over the past 2 years. Now assuring the centre's commitment to all-round development in Ladakh, Sitharaman also said the upcoming Bharat Next or the Bharat Net expansion and additional mobile towers would ensure digital connectivity to every panchayat in the Union Territory. And before we slip into another short break, let's look at the global headlines that we're tracking for you this morning. Explosions rock Jerusalem as Israel and Iran exchange fresh missile fire. Donald Trump wants Tehran not to test US resolve. Donald Trump claims he can broker peace between Iran and Israel, cites back-channel talks in motion while comparing it to India-Pakistan truce that New Delhi says was bilateral. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu does not rule out regime change in Iran, says military campaign aimed at nuclear threat could go further. G7 leaders gather in Canada with conflict in West Asia and Europe topping a tense global agenda. Donald Trump reportedly considers banning citizens from 36 more countries in possible expansion of travel restrictions. Pakistan still not on that list of additional 36 countries. Donald Trump targets Democratic sites for mass deportations, claims millions of illegal immigrants reside there. Meanwhile, Donald Trump greenlights Nippon Steel's $14.9 billion takeover of US Steel after security concerns have been well addressed. And to tech stocks in the US, Adobe shares sink despite strong earnings as investors worry about artificial intelligence payoff timeline. Taiwan failed sea drones off Pacific coast in new move to strengthen defenses against China. All these stories on the other side of the break. You're watching News 9.
झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया
Welcome back. Leaders of the G7 the group of 7 began arriving in the Canadian Rockies on Sunday for a high-stakes summit overshadowed by surging conflict between Israel and Iran. US President Donald Trump is expected to back Israel's military campaign while Europe urges restraint. The summit, hosted by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in the town of Kananaskis, is floating a proposal for a joint G7 call for de-escalation in West Asia. The meeting comes as Donald Trump, fresh off a military parade on his birthday, faces protests at home and looming trade deadlines abroad. Other leaders invited to the summit include India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as Canada hopes to reset ties with New Delhi. US President Donald Trump's administration is reportedly considering to expand its travel restrictions by potentially banning citizens of 36 additional countries from entering the United States. Now, earlier this month, Trump signed a proclamation of ban the entry of citizens from 12 countries as part of an immigration crackdown. 7 of those initial 12 countries are in Africa. Now, 24 of the 36 further countries now being considered for an expanded travel ban are also on the continent of Africa. Take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is considering significantly expanding its travel restrictions by potentially banning citizens of 36 additional countries from entering the U.S. That's according to an internal State Department cable seen by Reuters, which outlined a dozen concerns about the countries in question and sought corrective action. The State Department did not immediately respond to requests for comment.
We don't want them.
Earlier this month, Trump signed a proclamation that banned the entry of citizens from 12 countries as part of an immigration crackdown launched at the start of his second term. 7 of those initial 12 countries are in Africa. 24 of the 36 further countries now considered for an expanded travel ban are also on that continent. The cable, signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, raised the lack of a competent or cooperative government by some mentioned countries to produce reliable identity documents. Another was, quote, questionable security of a country's passport and concern around nationals of a country being involved in acts of terrorism in the U.S. or anti-Semitic and anti-American activity. The cable said some countries were not cooperative in facilitating the removal of their nationals from the U.S. who were ordered to be removed, and that nationals were overstaying their U.S. visas. The cable noted that not all of these concerns pertain to every country listed.
US President Donald Trump has ordered federal authorities to intensify deportation operations in Democratic strongholds like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, escalating his controversial anti-immigration agenda. In a Truth Social post on Sunday, Trump claimed that these cities harbor, quote, millions of illegal aliens and called them the heart of Democratic power center, echoing long debunked claims that undocumented immigrants are voting in large numbers. The directive follows mass protests in Los Angeles where ICE raids triggered public backlash. In response, Trump sent in 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines last week, despite opposition from local and state leaders. Staying with the US President Donald Trump has formally approved Nippon Steel's $14.9 billion takeover of US Steel, ending a turbulent 18-month saga clouded by union resistance and national security concerns. Now, Trump signed an executive order on Friday, clearing the way for the deal on the condition that both companies enter a binding agreement with the United States, with the US Treasury to address security concerns. Now, the bid, first announced in December 2023, sparked bipartisan backlash. Both Trump and former President Joe Biden opposed the deal last year, insisting US steel should remain American-owned, especially with Pennsylvanian voters watching closely ahead of the election. Moving to US markets, Wall Street ended sharply lower on Friday after Iran launched missiles at Israel in response to intensive Israeli strikes aimed at crippling Tehran's ability to build nuclear weapons. Here's a report.
Stocks fell across the board Friday after more clashes in the Middle East, with the Dow dropping about 1.8%, the S&P 500 more than 1%, and the Nasdaq declining 1.3%. Iran launched missiles at Israel in response to intensive Israeli strikes aimed at crippling Tehran's ability to build nuclear weapons. Airline stocks fell on fears that fuel costs could climb, while defense stocks such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman rose. Melissa Brown, managing director of investment decision research at SimCorp, says she thinks the effect of the conflict may be short-lived.
Over the long term, I've seen studies that show that that wars generally don't have a major impact on stock markets over, say a period of a few months to a few years, with some obvious exceptions. If we don't see a huge escalation, particularly outside of the borders where we're already seeing the conflict, I think that investors are going to go back to the idea that the Fed's going to lower rates, that we're not going to be in a recession, and even with somewhat higher oil prices, we managed quite well with higher oil prices for the past few years.
Other stocks on the move included Photoshop maker Adobe, which lost more than 5%. The company raised its annual revenue forecast, but that was overshadowed by concerns that the pace of its AI adoption was too slow. And shares of Oracle jumped more than 7.5% to hit a record high. The stock is now up more than 21% in the 2 days since the technology company gave an upbeat forecast, driven by demand for its AI services.
And finally, moving to Asia, off the coast of Wuxi, a quiet Taiwanese fishing port on the Pacific side of the island, Taiwan is quietly testing a new maritime defense tool called sea drones. Now, though unassuming in appearance, these remote-controlled vessels could become a strategic asset in Taiwan's effort to bolster coastal defenses amid rising tensions with China. More details in this final report.
Just off a small fishing port on Taiwan's Pacific coast, a local company is testing what could be a new weapon in the island's military arsenal: sea drones. They're a powerful, if unglamorous, weapon that's been used to great effect by Ukraine in the Black Sea against Russia. Now, Taiwan's learning how it could use sea drones as an effective and low-cost way to fend off any possible Chinese invasion. China views democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory and has ramped up its military pressure over the past 5 years, while Taiwan's government rejects Beijing's sovereignty claims. This Sea Shark 800 unmanned surface vessel, or USV, has been developed by Taiwanese manufacturer Thunder Tiger. The company's chairman, William Chen, told Reuters that they've seen USVs being deployed in Ukraine to ambush Russia, and that Taiwanese companies were paying attention.
If you look at the situation at the Taiwan Strait, we are outnumbered by China. But if we have enough USVs, we can deploy them along the east coast across Taiwan. They won't know where we placed them, as they are too small to detect and can be hidden. Therefore, every step becomes a danger, and this is a deterrence.
Chen told Reuters the Sea Shark 800 can carry 2,600 pounds of explosives and travel up to 310 miles. These uncrewed and remotely controlled small vessels can be guided towards ships or potentially even attack targets in the air. They're being developed in Taiwan at a time when the United States is pushing the country to transform its armed forces, with a view to wage asymmetric warfare using mobile, smaller, and often cheaper weapons which still pack a targeted punch. Chen Kuan-ting, a lawmaker for Taiwan's ruling party who sits on the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, told Reuters that U.S. Vs can deter China. He says that's because Taiwan is not the attacking side.
As long as we are prepared, we can defend our capital effectively. The whole island can be defended. So now we need to figure out the most economical way to effectively deter China, so they know that if they invade Taiwan, they are going to pay a much higher cost and face greater difficulties than if it were Ukraine. This is what we do next. The best way is to prevent war from ever happening.
Taiwan's Defense Ministry's Research and Development arm has termed the sea drone plan the Swift and Sudden Project. So far, it has a modest budget of around $26 million, with Taiwan's defense minister this week saying sea drones would be included in an additional spending package yet to be announced. Next week, Thunder Tiger will be among 12 Taiwanese and foreign companies joining a defense ministry exhibition to showcase USVs that may end up being added to Taiwan's arsenal.
And that's all we have for you on the show today. Thank you so much for watching, but news continues right here on News9, so stay tuned.
झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल